Covenanters prison. You're making me nervous with that thing.
Sorry, but
No, it's okay. It's okay. Just edit it, darling.
I will.
Get my good profile. Ooh. Yeah, cool. Right. Okay, the reason we've actually stopped here, first of all, though, is I mentioned this earlier this evening, but this here is one of the original pieces of the Flodden Wall. The Flodden Wall is the reason that for a couple of hundred years, Edinburgh was a compact... I'm hearing giggling. There's nothing worse than hearing giggling in a graveyard at night. Always makes you nervous. Was a compact city of a mile by a quarter of a mile. This is one of the reasons. Now, the story behind the Flodden Wall is the same old story with Scotland. We have a neighbour who we love dearly. We've always loved them. Lovely people. England. Blasted people. Yes, England, indeed. It's not unknown that we have a love-hate relationship, and at every occasion we do like to get in a fight, and the Battle of Flodden was no exception. I do apologise, I'm just seeing who this is. Sometimes we get just people roaming about and it becomes very disruptive because they don't actually realise that we do proper tours in here. I think we're okay. Sorry. They sound like they're being quiet. Okay, so the Battle of Flodden was a very different occasion, though. For once, Scotland actually went down with the inspiration of winning. Sorry, one moment. Could you shut that off for a second, mate, just so I can actually see? Sorry, great. Okay, so the Battle of Flodden was a very different occasion. Scotland actually went down a stronger fighting force. Inspired. We had 35,000 men as opposed to England's 25,000. We had heavy cannon, so did England. So that balanced that out. And we had a new weapon that we knew were going to take this battle. I want you to imagine a weapon, 8 foot, with a spike on the end. And then I want to hear a ooh. Yeah. You can see where this is going. We knew what we were doing. There's a little known secret though. Whenever Scotland and England fight, England always cheat. Always cheat. Without exception, they always find a way of cheating us. And they did, again, at Flodden. They had 25,000 men, as I've mentioned. They had cannon, but they had also developed a new weapon, which was a 6 foot pole with an axe on the end. The devils. But we are thinking, hey, we've got an extra 2 foot. It's quite common in Scotland. So, let's get this battle started then. The heavy guns roar, cannon blast overhead. And sadly, in the first salvo, Scotland's cannons were destroyed. Although we were very excited about having cannon, no one had actually taught us how to use them. So embarrassingly enough, we lost our cannon pretty much immediately. This left Scotland with only one option, and it was our favoured technique for fighting. Run at your enemy, screaming and pointing your weapons. So we did. Ah! And as the two battles joined, the two forces joined, suddenly our 8 foot sticks became 6 foot, 5 foot, 4 foot, 3 foot, 2 foot, until we were fighting with toothpicks. Scotland were absolutely annihilated in this battle, and what little remaining force was left ran as quickly as they could back up to Edinburgh in an absolute panic. Wheelie, 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 Jings Crivens, the English are coming! Panic filled the streets, and oddly enough, Edinburgh Council, in a... That's my job! I don't know what these people are like. What are these men? It's a graveyard. Edinburgh Council jumped to action. They started building the Flodden Wall. They drafted in every man, woman and child that they could to quickly put this together. 47 years later, they had nearly finished it. But thankfully the English hadn't actually appeared, so all was well. When the English did appear about 6 years later, we had completed the wall. And at this point in this tale, I do like to be a bit more generous, but on a Friday night, so we'll use that as a prime example. We'll say that the gentleman in charge maybe had a new baby born that day, so had been out celebrating, a few whiskies to wet the baby's head. And that's why we in Edinburgh do forgive him for not locking the gate. The English marched in, straight up to the garrison at Edinburgh Castle and took it without a bit of bloodshed. Not one of Edinburgh's proudest moments, but pretty much how we do things in Scotland. All the time. Disaster upon disaster. But in all honesty, I haven't really brought you to this wall to tell you that story. This wall has a far more sinister tale to tell. And I'm going to jump you forward in time. I'm going to jump you to the Renaissance, the Age of Enlightenment in Edinburgh. We were known as the Athens of the North. Probably gave ourselves that title, to be honest. Edinburgh were ahead of the game in everything. Literature, architecture, medicine, technology, and anatomy. We weren't embarrassed to tell the world how great we were at this point. But with anatomy, we were running into a bit of a snag. The anatomy department was just over there at the time, and Robert Knox, the anatomist, had a dilemma on his hands. And the dilemma was this: one body per year for 500 students. This was going to hinder our development. We'll do the kind of maths on it. Let's say 150 students get the body, and it starts to get a wee bit mushy. After the next 150 students, we're probably looking at soup. So that leaves 200 students, my maths is out as well, to basically sponge up what's left. It wasn't going to give us what we needed. But we're Scottish, we're absolute geniuses when it comes to business and job opportunities. So we created a new role in society known as the Resurrection Men. When I say we created it, it kind of just came about because people were skint and saw an opportunity. What the Resurrection Men would do is they would wait behind a wall or a part of a wall like this. They would wait until the funeral parties had left, until night fell. Then they would come over the wall. They would creep through the graveyard. They would find the grave, the freshly dug grave, and they'd line it with canvas sacking. They'd made a special wooden spade to dig with because it made very little noise, because the graveyard would be patrolled by the town militia. And they would dig down, just a small hole was all they would need, just roughly about the head and the shoulders of the body. They would hook under the armpits, drag the body out, cover up the grave, remove the sacking and make sure it looked perfect. This was the art. If it looked disturbed, someone would know that the body had been robbed, and straight away their crime would be discovered within a matter of hours. They would take the body that they'd just dug up to the anatomy department and sell it. And the reason they did this was for about £10. £10. To you and me that doesn't sound like much, but back in that day, £10 to some people was actually an annual wage. So I ask you now, all honesty, if for a couple of hours work, a little bit of risk, a little bit of dirt under your fingernails, if you thought you were going to get an annual wage for a night's work, would you consider it? It's a few honest people. I'll be keeping an eye on them though. Two of Edinburgh's finest grave robbers. Why there's people back up there? Two of Edinburgh's finest grave robbers, or well-known grave robbers, William Burke and William Hare. Renowned in history for their antics. I'll dispel a couple of myths though on this immediately. One, they weren't from Edinburgh, they were Irish. Two, ignore everything I've just said. Burke and Hare never once dug up a body. They created their own, plain and simple. Absolute geniuses. They took entrepreneurial skills to a new level. They worked out why hang about in the cold and wet. Why wait behind a wall? Why risk getting a bullet in the butt if you were caught, or hung if you were caught digging up a body, which was time consuming and tiring, when you could just make your own? Genius. Absolute genius. Think about it, there's lots of people walking about there. Who's going to miss a few? Lots of them. And that's what they did. They went on a spree. They became two of Scotland's most notorious serial killers. And before I get into the story, one of the craziest things about this city is how we portray and give homage to certain individuals. There was actually a couple of years ago, the council were actually considering putting up a statue to these guys. Two of Scotland's serial killers. They were going to give them a statue. I ask you why you get confused when you come in a graveyard at night, or why people go in the underground. That's because this city is full of madness. We are absolutely bonkers and we're proud of it. We do things like that. But Burke and Hare, getting back to them, their methods were wonderful, absolutely wonderful. What they would do is, in the Grassmarket, the bar still exists. It's called the White Hart Inn. I'm going to, at this point, because I'm on camera as well, say this is a disclaimer that I am not encouraging people to do this. I may be telling them how to do it, but I expect no one to do it. Okay, I've never had a camera on me like this before. Okay, what they would do is they would go into, I hope you're going to edit this, by the way.
Oh,
thank you. Make me look
like
good, make me look slim,
yeah.
Cut off a few pounds.
Full shot.
Thank you. Oh, you darling, I like that. He's sold already.
You're rushed.
Okay, what they would do is they would go into the bar. They would find a table where they could see everything. They would take a seat. And they'd wait. And they'd wait until they saw someone alone, someone who's maybe tired, or a stranger, a bit bedraggled, tourist, somebody that looked like they needed a bit of company. And they would go over to them. Hi there, can I buy you a drink?
I'm not going out now.
I usually get paid by doing that, but you know, some of them don't bite. They would go over and they'd buy this person a drink. And it was common, but it was unusual for this to happen. So the person would always be willing to accept it. And all night, they would bought drinks, they would be given fine food. They would make merry songs, would be sung, a gay time would be had. And this person would be made to feel like the centre of the universe. And when it came to pub closing time, we've got a lodging house just round the corner and we've got more drink. Why end the party now? And the person would go with them. And again, more drink would be consumed and great times would be had, stories would be told. And this person would be getting drunker and drunker. But Burke and Hare wouldn't necessarily be getting quite as drunk. Now this is a small group I've got tonight, this is lovely, and I can guarantee none of you have ever been in this state. But do you know when your head's like, and you're in and out of consciousness, you can't keep your head up. Things are just like a complete blur. And that's when they'd pounce. One would jump on their chest and pin them down. The other would clamp the nose and stick their thumb under the chin and stop them from breathing. The person was so drunk, so inebriated they weren't able to fight back. It was the easiest kill ever. Now, history says 18 people. It's actually 17 because one was already dead. But because they were targeting the homeless, prostitutes, vagabonds, tourists, the unknown elements of Edinburgh, new research has discovered that potentially you could have been looking about 80 people that they killed in their career. So, I want to ask that question again. If you knew for 80 people, each individual person, you got an annual wage, would somebody now not reconsider that as a good job opportunity? It's worth thinking about. Now, the story doesn't actually end there because eventually they got sloppy, they got careless, and they did get caught. And being such a wonderful and loyal friend, William Hare turned King's evidence. To turn King's evidence pretty much means I'll tell you everything we did, how we did it, when we did it, and I get away with it. And this is what happened. He left his friend Burke to hang, to the punishment. And Burke did hang, to within an inch of his life. They then took him off the gallows, put him on a table in front of everybody. This happened. Remember, public executions were entertainment. So everyone was watching, and these guys, people wanted to see hung. They took hot knives and started to flay the skin from his body. It's almost like a chicken, and you've got, you know, the raw chicken, and you've got the skin, and you've got the meat underneath, and you take the knife, and you can just feel it popping away at the sinews, just loosening off the skin. Imagine that happening with a hot knife. The knife's cauterizing the wounds as it happens, and your skin slowly getting peeled, layer by layer, off your body. They say you can last about a fifth of your body or so before everything gives up. So it's quite a torment to go through. And eventually he did die, his heart gave up, and they skinned the rest of him. They gave his actual carcass, what was left, to the anatomy department. So he kind of, justice was served there. But it's what they actually did with the skin that I think makes this story, probably it personifies Edinburgh yet again in history of madness. They made things out of his body, out of his skin, out of his buttocks. They made a Bible. From his chest, they made a wallet. And from the back of his hand. And this is still on display in the police museum on the Royal Mile. They made a business card holder out of the back of his hand. Don't know why they had business card holders in those days, but if you look at it, you can still see all the hair follicles. So it's actually quite interesting. It's a really macabre piece of history, but it's wonderful to look at. Hare, though, thinking he was a fine fellow, thinking he was getting away with it all, he didn't. Edinburgh mob justice doesn't forgive. These guys were killing our own, and they caught up with him. One of the legends says that he was caught just in the outskirts of Edinburgh. He was beaten awfully, ankles broken, ribs bruised, battered, and they plucked out both his eyes. One story says he was then put in a carriage to London, where he lived out the rest of his days as a blind beggar. I personally think, though, if the Edinburgh mob did catch up with him, he didn't get much further than the outskirts of Edinburgh. He probably was torn to pieces, beaten, battered, potentially even just strung up in the first tree that was found. But then again, he did betray his friend. So, you know, I think he probably deserved it. Now, what we're going to do, folks, is we are now going to head over to the Covenanters prison. I will be honest and say this is now where the mood of the whole tour will change. Personally, as a tour guide, I hate going inside this place. I know I shouldn't say that, but it's the truth. I've been doing these tours for a long time, and you know, this place still gets to me. So let's head across there. There is a path. Let's follow that. We'll see if everyone
Do you come back out this gate, yeah?
We do, yeah. I always like to finish off a wee bit up. Right, Covenanters prison. Ladies and gentlemen, what you're actually looking at is the first concentration camp in history. Long before anything during the wars, this place was in use. How it came into existence is, again, just about religion. I mentioned it earlier. I did say this is not a religious tour, but it does have a lot of history in Edinburgh. Basically, Episcopalian were the English. The Scottish were Presbyterian. We actually had a Scottish king on the throne at the time. Don't need this board. And he decided, even though he was Scottish, that he wanted everyone to practice the same religion and tried to enforce it upon Scotland. We said no, we weren't having that. He said, yes, you are. And we drew up the National Covenant in this graveyard. The National Covenant, abbreviated version, is basically, we're happy to have you as a king. That's great, don't interfere with our religion. The king wasn't having any of that, and we went to war. And for the first time, we actually won. The Scottish won. We took the battle all the way down to the gates of London. And at this point, the king, realising that his neck was on the line, changed his mind and said, look, you practice whatever religion you want. I'm fine with that. That's where things got quite bad for us. The force divided, the Covenanters divided. Half of them said, look, we've done what we came to do. The king's changed his mind. Let's go home. The other half wanted to continue the fight and take the king's head. So half the force returned to Scotland, half went on to the Battle of Bothwell Bridge, where they were, quite frankly, annihilated. The problem was the tacticians, the general, the real fighting force returned sensibly to Scotland, leaving a very ragtag army to go on and fight a very disciplined English force. That the remainder of that battle was about 1,400 men. That's all that was left, and they were marched back to Edinburgh in chains. And that gave the council a dilemma, what to do with them. This was their solution. Now I want you to ignore what you actually see here. This was a field. It was a part of the graveyard. It was behind a sealed wall, but it was a field. None of these movements were here. These guys were basically marched in here. They were told to lie face down on the ground and not move for 4 months through the harsh, cold Scottish winter. Now you can imagine it's cold tonight. I can't feel my fingers, I don't know about you guys. So imagine being barely clothed, barely fed, forced to lie face down on the ground. How horrendous that would be. We made it a lot worse for them though. Along this wall, all the way round, we put snipers. If they moved, and by that I mean if they raised their head, shot dead. If they looked like they were trying to escape, shot dead. If one of them did escape, well, that was marvellous. Well done for them. But 20 of his comrades would be marched out, lined up against this wall, and shot. This stone here actually has some of the musket ball indentations still. They're slowly fading because it's sandstone, but it's one of the ones that has actually preserved those marks. And this is where we're about to go into, folks. This is a place where a lot of suffering, a lot of misery has happened. I hate it. I absolutely hate going in here. But I get paid to do it. These good people have paid me to do it. So we're going to go in. Now there's a couple of things I'm going to ask before we go in. First, anybody here have a heart condition? No? Is anybody here pregnant?
No.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I'm always worried. Okay, and finally, does anybody here know what an inductor is?
Yeah.
You do, sir. Yes, I know you do. An inductor is an extreme focus. Pretty much what it means is, as soon as you step in here, you will be a focal point for attack. I believe one of the young ladies who's not going in did say that she does.
I'm not going in because they just cling to me. So.
Yeah, well, that's two. Come on, guys, let's make it fun. You know, there's a sweepstake going on with all the tour guides. I'm losing this sweepstake. I need attacks. No. Okay. So we're about to go in here. Who's not coming in, just so I know? Is it just the two of you guys coming in?
Sorry?
Are you coming in?
Yeah.
Good, so it's just you two ladies. Okay, folks, if I can ask very nicely, if you could just go stand between those two trees, that would be lovely. And do lock the gate behind us. I do warn you that.
I want to go under and just test.
Okay, but I don't need to because I've actually been on these tours now pretty much for a week and a half solid, so I know exactly which one to go into. The reason I do an experiment is because although we call it a poltergeist, we don't, as I say, really know what it is, because a poltergeist by definition has a focus. You know, maybe the mother of a family or the child, the father. It'll always focus on an individual, but we bring new people in here all the time. This thing doesn't focus on one person. It has a whole variety of different types of people to attack every night if it wishes to. Also, its concept of weakness is very much different. You know, we've had small children, we've had elderly ladies, and it will go for like this big chap at the back here. You know, it doesn't care. It will have a go. I wouldn't fight him, but this thing will have a go. The reason I usually do this experiment is because it moves as well. It first originated in the Mackenzie tomb, which is round the corner. One further down, it then appeared in. It's moved into this one, but lately we've had more activity in the one down here. So we'll head straight in. Now, before we head in here, going back to the Covenanters very briefly, all the Covenanters' history, everything that's happened, there was one gentleman responsible for it, and that was Lord Advocate George Mackenzie. This is the reason, or should I say, the name that we've given this entity is after George Mackenzie, and the reason for that is because it actually manifested in that tomb to begin with. His tomb's just round the corner, so basically his tomb's about 200 yards away from where he committed some of the worst atrocities in Scottish history, and that wasn't even the start of it, because for a couple of years through the killing times, he basically butchered, him and his forces butchered over 18,000 Scottish families just because of their beliefs. All these people in here, all those families, as I mentioned earlier, could have avoided that just by renouncing their faith, but that would have meant damnation. And that's what makes this place a really horrible kind of atmosphere, because these people suffered by their own free will. Everything that they suffered in here was through their own violation. They were happy to accept that torture. Now, we're about to step foot in here. This is where I won't lie to you anymore. When I say we're about to step foot in here, I mean you're about to step foot in here, because I don't actually go in here anymore.
First.
Okay. We can do photos after, folks, if you need to make your way in. Thank you. Photographs after, guys. It depends on my trousers. It depends on how people are. One of the things we always get told is that we actually talk too much. We don't allow atmosphere to build. Okay, folks, can I ask you to make your way to the back, and then I will bring you forward. There's a very good reason for this. Okay, that's enough now. You can turn round, and if you could all form a little circle round this light, but don't step into it. That's very important. So if I can see everyone, that's the next very important thing. I need to make sure that everyone's okay. The reason I don't want anyone in this light is because this is the zone where you get attacked. If you feel ill, if you get a cold spot, I mentioned them earlier, an intense chill in your stomach, you'll feel horrendous, you'll feel unwell, you'll try to get out, this is where you'll collapse. So this is the point that I don't want you going into. Now, this thing's getting a lot more active over the last couple of weeks because we've been bringing a lot of people in here. So as of now, we're on a time limit. I'll be honest with that. We only get a certain amount of time in here. I'm not going to tell you how much because you'll all start looking at your clocks. How did this come about? What are we dealing with? Well, one theory that people use is pheromones or hormones. Everyone emits hormones. Animal kingdom emit hormones. Hormones for happiness, joy, sadness, depression, sexual arousal, fear. Even the camera jumped, that was good. Okay, you have all now just released a small cloud of fear pheromones, or at least I hope that's what it is. The story of how this came into being, we think happened about 12 and a half or so years ago. Happened at the Mackenzie Tomb, actually. What happened is, one very cold, wet, stormy night, a homeless man entered the graveyard looking for shelter. He basically shambled through the graveyard and came across the Mackenzie Mausoleum. He looked at it, knowing it had a reputation for being haunted, but he was wet and he was cold, and he went up the steps, and lit his lighter and looked through the grill. And what he saw was a very dry looking floor. But he also saw at the back of the tomb a grill. And motivation's very much different when you're wet and cold. So he clambered over the fence and he started kicking at this grill, and it came loose. So he managed to squeeze into the tomb. So there he was in the Mackenzie Tomb, wet, but at least it wasn't raining in there, so he could dry off. And he tried to lie down and get some sleep. For an hour or so he tried, with no success, but he was looking at this grill on the floor with steps going down. And these steps led down to the lower part of the tomb. And in all honesty, his motivation's very different, so he decided to go down there. And he came across 4 coffins. Now, to you and me, going into a haunted crypt, no. Going into the lower level of a haunted crypt, no. Finding 4 coffins, definitely no. We would all get out of there. But he decided that there might be something in these coffins that he could sell or use to keep dry. So he looks around and he finds some wood and he starts battering away at the coffins. Bang! 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 At this time, the groundskeeper that I mentioned earlier goes out on his rounds. His job is to make sure the graveyard's all locked up, everything's safe. It's cold, it's wet, he's miserable. His dog that he always takes with him is miserable. But to add to that, he starts hearing bang, bang, bang. And he knows where it's coming from, but he's hoping it's his imagination. But no, bang, bang, bang appears again. And he realises it's coming from Mackenzie's tomb and he's going to have to investigate. So he makes his way across. At this moment, our homeless man in the basement is getting really frustrated. He's not getting any leeway. So he decides to step back to get a harder hit on the coffin, not realising that the ground, the floor of the tomb's rotted, and it crumbles under his feet, and he falls down, and he's rolling, and he's banging, and he's battering, he feels things scraping him, and he's a bit dazed and confused. Eventually he stops rolling, and he stops falling, and he gathers himself, and he fumbles for his lighter, and he lights it up, and he comes face to face with a skull, and he looks round, and there's more skulls, and there's more body parts, and bits of skeleton everywhere, and they're all covered in slime, a green slime, and they're all moving because there's lots of bugs crawling through the slime. And he looks at himself and he realises he's cut, he's covered in green slime, and he's got bugs in his beard and his hair, and understandably he gets a bit upset, and he freaks out, and he clambers back up through the hole in the floor. What he'd actually fallen into was, as I mentioned earlier, one of the illegal plague dumping pits. It goes from Mackenzie's tomb to the meadows. There's a reason that area is so lush and green. But he clambers out the hole. He's basically bounding up the stairs as fast as his bruised body can handle it, just in time for the groundskeeper to get to the door and shine his torch in. And from the depths, he sees this image, this creature that shouldn't exist, this entity from a horror movie coming towards him. They both scream. The groundskeeper falls back and drops his torch. The homeless man, thinking it's the Grim Reaper finally come for him, runs to the back of the crypt and starts crawling through the hole. The groundskeeper picks himself up, he finds his torch, just in time to see this homeless man bounding over the fence and shambling towards them. Again, they both scream and they run. Apparently, it took 45 minutes of them chasing each other round the graveyard before the police arrived and stopped it all. The little dog had gone home by this point. He'd had enough. He was wrapped up in bed, quite warm at this stage. But imagine the fear, imagine the energy that released in that one event. Because a week later, all this started. It started small, like wisps of a breeze going through your hair, like bugs running through your hairline, and you would have a scratch. Bite marks would appear, bruises would appear, people would be punched and kicked. And then it got more intense. People would start collapsing, panicking, trying to run out the tomb and collapsing. In one tour alone, we had 5 gentlemen drop down for no reason. So at this stage, I'm going to ask how everyone's doing. Is everyone feeling okay?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also going to ask another question. Did anyone want anything to happen tonight?
Me.
No, of course you did. I know you did. I can guarantee if something did happen, folks, you would feel awful, because I know I do. During the course of the night, we tell you some lovely stories, and we try and obviously invoke some nice emotions in you. And when we come in here, we can never guarantee anything will happen. We try and scare you a little bit. We give you a bit of fun. I haven't done much of it tonight because it's a lovely group, and I didn't really want to be nasty to you in certain ways. I used to play lots of tricks, you know. One of the things that I do quite often is I'm putting my lighters on, and you guys always watch that, so it really messes up with your night vision. You'll notice I never watch it. And I play with my torch and I flash it about, and it messes with your eyes. One of the things that I always used to do, and I haven't done it for a while, because I don't like stepping inside here in all honesty, is I used to, when I'm telling the stories when it's a big crowd, they don't pay as much attention. That's why I didn't do it to yourselves. And what I'd do is I'd shine the torch up at the door, and if you make it move, you can actually make the door move. And it's quite...
That's why you left the gate open.
That, ladies and gentlemen, is our jumper outer. I will apologise, I hate them, but they're lovely guys at heart. They get paid to do that, and he'll already be in the pub because he'll know that someone's after his blood. There's 2 reasons we actually use a jumper outer, 2 legitimate reasons. One, it does give you just a tiny wee bit of a legitimate scare. You know, everyone expects it when you come in a ghost tour. Yeah. 2, it actually lets me know that I'm now exceeding my time limit in here. When I do say that, I do mean that genuinely. We have a strict time limit in the sense that after a certain period, things do start happening, and we don't like people to get injured. We don't like people collapsing, because as you notice, this is a gravel floor, and it does hurt, and people do get cut quite badly when they fall in this, and we have had a lot of people collapse. You'll also notice I'm now slightly rambling because I like to see what happens. I like to keep you in here a wee bit longer because I am quite cruel. But you know what? I think we'll get out of here now.
Yeah.
We'll go back to the safety of the main graveyard, if there is such a thing. I'll let a couple of you take some photos. The gates will be shut in a couple of minutes, so do be quick. Okay, let's go.
Sorry.
saying that. No, no. On this occasion, I think you're actually quite right, because I did think I saw something at the corner of my eye as well, and it was kind of like in between. So I'll be honest and say, yeah, and I don't usually...
It doesn't follow you out, does it?
No, no, that's the one in the underground that does that. Okay. Right, ladies and gentlemen, this is kind of the end of the tour. I like to tell everyone one last story, and the reason I do this is because it's my way of apologising if anyone's wet themselves. This is actually the tomb of George Mackenzie. This is a locked private tomb, so we cannot actually access this. In a minute, if you wish, I'll show you the actual grill in the floor and the steps that lead down, but we will do that after I've kind of concluded this story. First of all, I just want to thank you all for being a lovely audience, because you have. It's a small group tonight. Sometimes that can maybe not be as atmospheric from your point of view, but you have all seemed to have enjoyed it, which I'm really happy with. And we are a professional storytelling company. The jumper outer is the only gimmick we actually use. We don't go for all the costumes, etc. We go hopefully just for the interesting stories, try and amuse you, give you a laugh, give you a scare, and give you a good night. If you have experienced anything in there tonight, which potentially you have, you've all got a ticket. The reason we give you a ticket, our email address is on it. We're very serious when we say this. Please email us, please contact us with any of your thoughts, anything you feel happened. Let us know if you experienced anything, because we do genuinely document this. We do have, as this gentleman is, a few investigation people coming in. We have vigils in there. We have agencies come in to actually monitor it. One of the most documented cases, and I honestly wish I could remember the chap's surname. I always call him Wilson, but I'm not sure if I'm confusing that with one of the criminals from the Porteous case. But his name was, first name Colin.
Colin Grant.
Colin Grant, is it?
Yeah, the priest.
Thank you. I always call
Spirituals
it,
minister.
yes, I always call it Colin Wilson, but I think I'm confusing it with the Porteous one. There's a gentleman who was hung quite young in Porteous. Colin Grant was a minister and an exorcist who came in there to try and exorcise the place, and he said that he successfully released some of the souls. We've actually got this documented, it's on our boards. He left saying that he left in a horrible state. He was trembling, he was nervous, he was sweaty, and he actually said, "This place will kill me." And within about 2 weeks he was dead, sadly. Whether or not it was that place, but obviously that's been connected to it. His son, I believe about a year later, did come and try to do the similar thing. Had a very similar effect. Thankfully he didn't pass away, but I do believe he actually left the country. He just hightailed it, he just refused to come back. And we've had a lot of incidents like that. So we do genuinely take this seriously. So I do ask, if you experienced anything, do get in touch with us. Please let us know. My boss, the evil genius that he is, he loves to hear about this stuff. He's written a few of the books. He's documented this for years. This is one of his passions. He's a big coward and refuses to come in here. Edit that. He no longer really comes in or goes into the Covenanters anymore. But then, you know, he's getting on a bit in years. Edit that. Okay, one last story for you. The reason I tell this story is because I like people to get an idea of what can happen. There's a funny side to this, but also a serious side to what we do. This happened a few years ago, and this was in one of our festival tours, if I remember correctly. And what it was is, during the festival we get huge tours. We're talking about 50, 60 people. Sometimes I feel they're a little bit too big, but they're good fun because it creates a lot of energy. On this particular tour, as we got to the gates of the Covenanters, on the question of inductors, a big Texan gentleman raises his hand and goes, "Yes, I think I might be one of those." The tour guide looks at him and says, "Well, why do you feel this, sir?" And he very honestly admitted that as a child he was attacked by a poltergeist. Now, as a tour guide, we are trained to try and be sceptical. I'll be honest, we need to be, to keep our mental health intact, quite frankly. We believe as much as we can, but we always have to keep a straightforward head. So the tour guide looked at him and said, "Well, if you believe that, sir, you're more than welcome to come in. You know the warnings, but if you're an inductor, you know the risks." The gentleman said, "Yes, I'll enter. More than happy to do that, but I'm not coming in the Black Mausoleum." So, how this then proceeded as everyone piled into the mausoleum. The tour guide was standing where I was on the doorstep. You'd see the silhouette of the tour guide, and behind that you'd see a tall Texan smoking a cigarette. So you'd have the cigarette going up and down, up and down. So you see a dark shadow smoking. The tour guide starts his story. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Black Thud. In the corner, someone had gone down. Who was it? Oh, no, he's back up. A Norwegian accent goes, it's okay, I just fell, just slipped. Okay, everything's fine then. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the Black Thud. The same gentleman goes down, but this time he doesn't get back up. What happens in these incidents is usually everyone moves as quickly away from them as possible. Nobody likes to be near someone who's potentially been attacked by a poltergeist, not even the tour guides. We generally gingerly walk up to them, tap them, you alive? You breathing? And someone usually goes, yeah, it looks like he's breathing. Oh, right, that's good, thank goodness for that. Our first aid is very limited. It usually involves me running in the opposite direction. This is where things got a bit weird though, because the Texan gentleman decided to be a superhero at this moment in time and charges across the Covenanters prison going, I'll help you, buddy. He charges into the mausoleum and starts picking up the Norwegian under the arms. Two of his friends grab a leg each, two of the Norwegian's friends grab a leg each, and they start bundling him out of the mausoleum. All hell then breaks loose. At the opening, a lady starts feeling something tugging her hair. At first she thinks it's someone behind her, but then realises it's a brick wall. She starts screaming, the poltergeist is stealing my hair! The poltergeist is pulling my hair! Oh my god, the poltergeist is pulling my hair! And this is the moment in every tour guide's career that we fear. There's a panic indeed, but there's a special word we use and it's called stampede. This is basically when the tour guide is standing in the doorway, and it's the only doorway, and there's 50 people facing him wanting to get out of that mausoleum really fast, and there's only one obstacle in the way. On this occasion, the tour guide ended up in the middle of the Covenanters on his backside, bewilderedly looking at all these people running towards him screaming. Some went left, some went right. The noise was amazing, screaming, panicking. Now at this point I'm going to point out to you, there's only one gate to get in there. Those people that went left very quickly came up to a brick wall. The poltergeist has stolen the gate! The poltergeist has stolen the gate! The ones that went right were going in the correct way. But we hadn't actually cut the trees at this moment. The two sentinels, as we call them, have quite low-hanging trees. We hadn't got round to pruning them. And they ran into them. The poltergeist is stealing my eyes! The poltergeist is stealing my eyes! Pandemonium breaks out. The tour guide very quickly, after about sort of 15 minutes, manages to get everyone back together. Though, come on guys, it's okay, everything's fine. And kind of congregates them in the centre of the Covenanters, tries to calm people down. At this point, we'll go back to our Norwegian though. Imagine passing out in a black tube. Imagine that being your last thought. And then you start to regain covering, being carried through a graveyard by three shadowy figures. Panic, fear, shock. He freaked out, he starts flailing and kicking. The Texan very sensibly releases. Thud goes the Norwegian onto the ground. The Texan walks away. His two friends weren't quite as lucky. They decided to hold on to his legs. The description that the tour guide gives of this next incident, I can't really do justice, but just imagine a kind of thudding, hollow, cracking, squelchy, kind of echoey, you can hear it everywhere, noise as the boot hit the nose and flattened it onto the face. It was apparently just a thud squelch noise followed by screaming. No man apparently should ever scream the way this man screamed, was what went through everyone's head. And the only reason this man was screaming in this way was because he was being attacked by a poltergeist. Everyone went mad. Everyone panicked again and scattered. Some had managed to get out of the gates and running about here. Others had ran to the far end of the Covenanters. The whole thing kicked off. We got a phone call from our boss about 20 minutes later. Could you get back to the graveyard? Could I get as many tour guides in the graveyard as quickly as possible? Apparently we had 50 loose, crazed people running about. For the next hour, we walked around the graveyard like this. Hello? Anybody there? Hello? Oh, yes, there's someone. Okay, come with me. We found 3 women at the back of the Covenanters like this. And we carried them out in that position. They refused to move. They were so scared. It took us, as I say, about an hour or so to clean that up. And it is a funny story, but at the same time it has a serious side to it, because obviously people did get hurt, people did get freaked out by what happens in there. And it shows you to the extent it can happen. It can happen to one person, or it can cause a mass hysteria with 50 people. And that's why we do genuinely ask, it doesn't matter if the one person maybe experienced something or you all did, do make us aware, please. It's very important for the continuation of what we're doing here as a job, but also for study and research into this phenomena. That is pretty much now us this evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you again for coming along on this tour. You have been a small but perfectly formed group. The exits to the graveyard are over there. Obviously it's a Friday night, go have a drink, you probably need it. I will say one last thing, which I do offer to people. It takes a little bit of my soul every time I do offer this. This is not part of the tour, this is just something that I'm happy to show a few people who apparently are fanatical about a boy wizard. This graveyard has a lot of influence to do with Harry Potter. And, some of the graves which are dotted about the graveyard do actually have names of characters from the books. So if anybody is interested in seeing them, I'm more than happy to show you those. There's no real stories behind them, because if you've read the books, you know the story. I'm not going to waste my time with that. But I'm more than happy to show you a couple of the graves and where they are if you are interested, okay? If not, the way out's that way, folks, and I bid you a very good night. And thank you very much for coming along. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Sir.
Keep you a bit early
Oh,
on.
no, that's great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, sorry, does anyone want to quickly have a look in here to see the grill? And this gentleman's got his torch, so he'll like to give you a better view than mine. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, there we go.
Take you ready just next week.
Yeah, no worries.